Hi, this is Strength Starts Here podcast, episode 3. We got Troy Shanks. I'm the boss, and we have Sean in the background here doing some recording today. Today we want to talk about nutrition, food intake with, each individual sport that we compete in and any differences that might be there. I'm sure there is some for some people, and for others it might be very similar. Bodybuilding we have the old school style bulking, which is just eat anything and everything as many times a day as you can to get as big and fat and juicy before you cut all the fat off.
That's my preference.
Trending nowadays, probably because more social media, you can see people real time all the time compared to in the past where you have no social media. You might see a guy and then 3-4 months later you don't see him, so he could be a different person when you see him. I think a lot of that plays into the new categories for sure, with the men's physique and the classic physique, the fitness and the bikini divisions.
More ready year round, right?
Yeah, because they always got eyes on them. They're trying to keep their sponsorships. They're doing more photo shoots. And there's benefits to both. I think it kind of meets in the middle as to where I fall. I do like my cheat meals. And off season, I do want to get big. But, man, you do cardio twice a day for 10 weeks straight plus posing and training. It is not fun trying to cut all that excess weight off. So I just monitor it a little bit better, into this off season and my next prep. And just maintained a little bit more cardio consistently 5 days a week. Still maintained at least 4 to 5 of my normal meals. And then maybe 3 to 4 times a week I'd have some food, some junk food you might call it, maybe chips or some chips and salsa. Make a meal that has a little bit more in it than your normal diet food for the last meal. And it's sometimes so much food that if you eat something that's a little bit off plan, when you're off season, you're not going to get the 6 meals. So sometimes we just go, okay, let's have 5, and that 5th one's just a little bit bigger.
So it's usually the one end of the day.
End of the day. That way, because you're going to go fast, for that roughly 8 to 9 hours before you have the next meal. And if you tend to do that with junk food early in the day, a lot of guys don't have an appetite, and so they don't get all the meals in, and then you're just kind of setting yourself you're not getting the calories you need.
Yeah. Makes sense.
It changes your metabolism. I mean, it's eating clean is how I've liked to do it, and then maybe having just a cheat meal once a week if you can maintain the mental and the cravings, and that's just a lot of practice. And what's the real goal that you're trying to shoot for?
Yeah.
For which show? And then as we clean up 20 weeks out, start cleaning up maybe 1 cheat meal a week. 16 weeks out, a little bit. Start to drop the carbs and it's just super clean then. And I even like to carb up clean with just rice and honey and stuff like that. Not even eat the cheeseburgers of the past and things like that, just because it kind of bloats your gut and it gives you a different look. You work the whole year for one show sometimes, and it's 3 minutes on stage.
Yeah.
It's a lot for a little, right? A lot of work for a little time to present that. So. And then we got the strongman powerlifting side of things where we've kind of seen a little bit more of a hybrid, right? More recently, the 80s, big refrigerator dude, just huge mothers out there eating pizzas and 10 Big Macs after they lift. And you deserve a pizza and an ice cream because you got your squat today every day of the week. And I think it's a little bit very unheart healthy to a certain degree. Yeah. I think everybody's kind of migrated a little bit healthier, but you need a lot of calories when you're a strong man.
Yeah, and I don't know where the change came from, but the idea used to be weight moves weight. So you had to be big, and you could see it in the powerlifting, of yesteryear, and even strongman in the past, 5-6 years has really done a huge transition where now you don't have to be 450 pounds and 6'8" to win. You could be 6 foot, 300 pounds, as long as you're, movable, so that's kind of where that change came from, right?
Is that from more of the events changing in strongmen, or more that the evolution of the human is just getting more efficient and stronger at a smaller size? Because I'm seeing kind of both sometimes.
Yeah, and I definitely think it's the change of just human race, right? Where you don't have to be that big to be that strong anymore. Because you say, like, maybe the events change, but if you really think about it, they were doing Husafell walks for distance. They were doing train pulls. They had a lot of moving events in the 90s, and even before then, I think back then maybe the big guys moved better. But I think that in powerlifting shows the same thing, right? Like,
Right.
I mean,
They're smaller and stronger.
Yeah. I think the 181 division, 198, and 220 even, like at a top angle, those are like the most impressive weight classes right now. Those are where the monsters are coming in at. Now, obviously, you have, the Bell and you have Julius Maddox, and you'll always have those monsters that are just, massive and move a serious amount of weight. But these little guys, we call them little, still
Under 200 pounds.
Yeah, right? Like, but these little guys are moving some stupid weight.
I think you have more volume of competitors in the lighter weight classes. There's the monsters, and that's a smaller group, kind of like a pyramid.
Yeah.
You have more people that can compete at 181 than at 275.
Which used to be the exact opposite, right? Like,
Right.
it used to be that reverse pyramid where you had a few little guys, and everybody was 300 plus.
I think it still comes back to the social media again. Now,
Yeah.
all this information's out there. People that wouldn't compete in strongman and powerlifting 5 years ago, they have availability to do it now. We're kind of pushing that society-wise. At least we are, for sure, in Arizona. But I've seen it everywhere growing, So for the strongman side of things, when you're what does your diet look like? For a strong man, kind of a daily, how many meals are you eating? Kind of what's the calories look like? Because, if you can kind of compare a bodybuilding and a power lifter and a strong man and maybe an Olympic lifter, you can all eat clean. You can all eat dirt. You can all do similar things, and the calories can be pretty high. And even a high-end bodybuilder can eat almost as much and as many times a day as, an intermediate, 350-pound strong man, for example, maybe different types of food.
Well, yeah, and just real quick on that, I watched another podcast with Jay Cutler and Brian Shaw. Their diets were very similar.
Right.
And, Jay Cutler, 300 pounds. Brian Shaw was 450, and a different training style, but their diets weren't that, different.
The calories were very close, right?
Yeah, the calories are very, very close. Yeah. Brian was a little bit more dirty on it, Obviously, Jay Cutler was very meticulous, right? But and that's the fun part about strongman,
right?
Is that you don't have to be. You want to stay, on track, but you don't. You can have a couple extra cheats,
because it's a performance base.
Yeah. So I would say, like, right during competition, prep and everything like that, I'm usually at about 5,000 calories. I've bumped that up as much as 7, when I was just pushing to try to hit,
and those
300
extra
body
calories
weight.
are like at the end of the day, tossing in some ice cream or cookies, or is it like another burger, or what do you think?
Carrie makes me a dessert shake, which just has everything in it. Half a gallon of ice cream and peanut butter and oats and Oreos and, milk and frozen berries.
Just to get those calories.
And that by itself, was about 2,000 calories. So that's literally where the the difference came from. Oh, and then 2 scoops of protein powder, because
there you go.
You got to push the protein in there.
It's a protein shake.
Yes, see, it's for a purpose. It's not just dessert. No, so and like you were saying, in your off season, you stay on track all day, and then at the end of the day, you kind of.
So you kind of keep the similar style in a way.
Yeah, my meals are all the same.
Very similar.
Yeah, I do my 6 eggs and my toast and spinach for breakfast, and 8 ounces of beef 3 times a day with 2 cups of white rice, and dinner's usually usually it's steak in our house, and then a noodle or something along that line, and then
a good carb, easy to eat.
Yeah.
Usually train late, so it's kind of a post-meal.
Exactly.
So that's good.
Yeah, and then pre-workout, on that too, pre-workout, I've found, for me at least, a nice fat peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Man.
Pre-training, is perfect for me. You know, it
You
keeps
hated
me.
them as a kid when you're eating them at school.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
man, they're so delicious
and
nowadays.
I even leave the crust on these days. You know, she gets me the healthy bread, but yeah. So that's basically what mine looks like, and you know, I do eat a lot of gummies. You know, so I love my gummy bears and my gummy worms.
All throughout the whole day.
Depends on how I feel. If I start to feel a little, you know, low blood sugar,
A little dip
you
in the
know,
old blood sugar.
I'll throw an extra couple bears in. But yeah, during training, I've gotten away from that, doing the peanut butter and jelly sandwich before on
It
and I
gives
use
you enough energy.
it does, you
Little
know,
bit
the
of fat,
sugars
little
from the
bit of
because I
carbs.
use jam, right? So
Okay.
it's a little bit less, you know, processed or whatever you want to call it. But and then the whole grain bread, right? Like I love the 12 grain bread, so I use that. So yeah, it's a little bit more of a steady energy source, and that's why we actually tried to do that in the first place. Is because I was having a bag or two of gummies every training session, and that's not healthy.
It's really just
Longevity wise, that can't be great for you, right? So,
depending on the amount, maybe you spiked your insulin too high during that time.
and that was usually, I think, the problem, you know, because back then I was doing Sour Patches, and I'm sure that extra sugar that's sprinkled on top isn't good for you, you know. So we know these things. Some of us are a little bit more hard headed, and it takes something bigger or someone coming to us and saying, "Hey, health is, you know."
Well, you're managing two different things. I mean, weight does move weight to a certain
Yeah.
degree, right? But the body was, you know, originally designed for us individuals
Yeah.
to be a certain size, and everybody's a little different. So you got to just, you know, monitor your blood work, blood pressure, you know, your A1C, things like that.
Yeah.
You know, once you get to a little bit more competitive level, and I would suggest you kind of always do that if you're smart about it.
Yeah.
Find a baseline. Then when you start eating more and you're training harder, then you kind of know, so you know how to add the calories, so you're not just wasting them. I mean, I like to take it to the next level because, you know, you're spending all this time training for that one day or that 5 minutes. To maximize it with a couple other little things along the way really kind of helps.
Yeah.
You take it a little bit more to a scientific level, and then you don't have as many problems. How many meals a day then do you average eat for the strong man? At least 5?
At least 5.
At least 5.
Yeah, I'm eating at least 5 times a day. So it's, you know, breakfast, you know, 3, so 4, yeah, 5 meals.
Do you have any like shakes throughout the day or around your training or anything like that?
I don't. You know, like I said, if I do those, you know, dessert shakes, I'll throw the protein powder in there. But as far as like shakes throughout the day, all my calories and protein source, that all comes from
Whole food.
Whole Foods.
So it's not.
I just think it processes better, you know, and it satiates better for sure. So for me, and I don't know if I threw a bunch of bananas and stuff, and it'd probably have the same effect for me, but it doesn't fill me up. You know, a shake doesn't fill me up, and that's usually how I know it's time to eat, because I do get hungry at about that 2.5 hour mark, you know.
There's a reason they call protein and all these other things we can add in supplements.
Yeah, exactly.
They supplement a whole food based diet. I think people sometimes get, you know, hey, what you get young guys coming up to me, hey, what type of protein powder do you use?
Yeah,
Well,
beef.
I don't have to.
Yeah.
Bodybuilding's not very far off in our off season than
No.
a strongman or a powerlifting diet like that. You can have a little extra carbs, you can have a little extra fat, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on like Frank's bread or an Ezekiel bread, you know, with the jam and or almond butter. Heck yeah, you can toss that in the off season for that extra the power. You're trying to put weight on, you're pushing calories, you're pushing the weights really heavy to gain that strength and size, and you need the food to do it. I think the only thing that's a little bit different, even off season and preseason, is we add a lot of, you know, a couple of shakes around our training to maximize. And anyone can do this. It can be any lifter. It doesn't have to just be bodybuilders, but power lifters, you know, any strength training, endurance training, replenishing the cells with the glucose, right, you know, with dextrose, which is the fastest form, you know, fastest into the body and turns into glucose for
Right.
you. So you're using it real time. So as you're training, we sip through a little amino dextrose drink throughout our training. It all depends on what size you are and how you're pushing. And then right after, the only shakes that I have are those intra-workout shakes, and then a post shake, which is dextrose again and protein powder
Okay.
in isolate way. So you can do that as a strongman or an Olympic lifter just to replenish, because their cells are open and they're depleting while you're training. And if you can force feed this right into it right as you're using it.
And you prefer that shake post training over whole food? Do you prefer it
No,
just for the replenishment?
within an hour
the quick acting
So your
aspect?
the insulin sensitivity is highest, and your cell are being depleted while you're training, but they're also open, and there's a window of opportunity, which is it varies depending on who you talk to, but it's 15 minutes to an hour. So if you can get during the training, get your dextrose in, and you're replenishing it immediately after training. We have the dextrose and protein shake, and then within an hour, we have a full food meal, a full meal. So the shakes, they only last about 30 minutes. It's pre-digested.
Yeah.
You know, sugar's fast acting. It's in and out quick. The protein powder's already pre-digested. It's already been processed to use very quick in the body. So you could put a 45-minute time limit on that, really. So if you're using that as a meal replacement,
Yeah.
you know, it's kind of hard to have it last for much more than an hour and a half, you know. So we take that right after, fills the cells, and within an hour, we're having a full meal.
You're hungry anyway by that time, right?
Yeah, you're starving anyway, usually. Off season, you're pushing a lot of food. So it's just sometimes you feel like you're pushing every meal. But most of the time, you know, if you're kind of this new thought process, not getting too fat, you're kind of usually pretty hungry for the meals.
Right.
And then also, if you're getting bigger and putting more size on, it requires more fuel. It requires more protein to keep the muscle that size. So having that food to build on, I mean, you can look at it kind of like building a doghouse requires X amount of material, but to build a full house is that much more.
Right.
So if you're a small guy, you don't need as much. You're just starting. But as you grow, you need to continue adding the material to build that big, you know, the full structure. So now, endurance sports, I mean, we're both.
I have a lot of endurance
I have a
when
lot
it
of
comes
endurance. Just sit there and watch people do endurance
Oh,
sports.
yeah. Hours.
But it's still very similar nutrition wise. You have to eat many times a day.
Yeah.
Tends to be a little bit different on the ratio from
More
carbs.
carbs, right?
Yeah, well, endurance, you know, you want a fuel source. Protein's the muscle builder. If you're getting X amount per pound, that's all you need. But if you're going on a 100-mile bike ride, you're going to need a lot of fuel. So the fats, the fast-burning carbs, the big pasta meals after, the dextrose shakes throughout the training with the sodium, magnesium, and your electrolytes. Very same approach, a little bit different ratios, constantly fueling the body.
So less concerned with maybe the high amount of protein.
Yeah, for guys building
Because-
muscle.
I mean, really, right? Like most endurance athletes probably want to refrain from building too much muscle because it's just more weight on their joints as they're running or swimming, right? So
You're going to feel different if you're eating a ton of protein, but then you're going on a 100-mile bike ride and you
Yeah.
have very little carbs. It's like running your tank out of fuel, but you got a Hemi in it,
yeah,
but you don't have any fuel to move it.
right.
So, you know, definitely changing you only need a certain, if you're 180 pounds, 150 pounds, you're only going to need X amount of protein. As a bodybuilder at 270 or a strongman at 300 pounds, you're going to need 3 times that in the protein to keep the muscle size. And then you add the carbs per output and where you're at in that block of training or, you know, into a show or a meet. What about like moving into week of the show, week of a meet, week of a comp? How do you approach that? Because bodybuilding's pretty specific. We can do powerlifting and strongman kind of similar, but we also can kind of put powerlifting kind of toward the bodybuilding style if you're cutting weight, for example.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, and with that, a lot of strongmen are cutting weight these days too. I'm not a fan of it. I did it for a few years. I don't like the cuts. Mentally, it messes with me. You know, my
Losing the size part of it, or just having to deal with, I got to do the comp and lift these weights, and now I have to diet on top of it all.
No, just because I assume if I'm 5 pounds lighter body weight, well, I had to have lost 20 pounds on my bench, or 50 pounds on my
A little
squat.
psychological, maybe.
Absolutely. You know, there's no real instance where that's really happened. You know, maybe a drastic weight cut, zap my strength somewhere. But, you know, if I'm cutting for a show, I don't think it's ever really affected me too much, except for mentally. So
It absolutely can, though. If
oh, yeah.
If done incorrectly.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Right, and that's cutting out all that protein, and you're letting your muscle waste away, and
Probably more than a week out at that
right.
point. Yeah. So more specific, like
yeah.
5 days into a comp. You know.
And I might be a little different than most, but what I tend to do is I cut the sugars. So I do cut like all my simple sugars and everything. To me, it just makes my joints feel better, getting rid of some of that inflammation and everything.
Inflammation caused by it.
Yeah. So and I up my water intake.
You're also deloading the training too, as well, right? So you might
Correct.
not need all that sugar. You're already replenished.
Exactly, and that's so. Then I do bring down my carbs. Coming in, and then the night before the comp, I have my hard carb meal. I do a vitamin drip that helps replenish any of the stuff that I might have
Electrolytes.
lost over the week.
Some vitamins, some electrolytes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Is it dextrose too?
minerals. No,
Just say,
yeah, saline, minerals, vitamins, glutathione, a couple other things. A lot of immune support, right? Because even though you're on a deload, I always feel, we talked about this in one of the previous episodes. I feel like mentally coming into it, I'm already like self-doubting, right? And then on top of that, my body, I feel like I start to get sick when I deload. And, again, all mental, I'm sure. So I do a lot of immune support stuff coming into it.
So mentally, maybe before, I would see sometimes that the physical drain from after doing a comp
Yeah.
might cause some of that as well. So taking the immune support during to last you through probably is not a bad idea anyway.
And I've definitely noticed after starting these vitamin drips, and I do them the night before a comp, I've done them a morning before a comp as well, and similar results, I think. So I think that you can do either, but definitely feel better the next day of after a comp, taking those vitamin drips, whether it's the morning of or the night before the comp. I feel much better, and I don't get sick like I used to.
So guys that don't have the ability to get these vitamin drip bags and aren't cutting,
Yeah.
really just comes down to hydration.
Yep.
So those last 3 days into a strongman meet or a comp, if you're not cutting weight, you're just really focusing on making sure you're eating the clean source of fuel, having that nice meal the day before you go to bed the day before,
Yep.
and then just making sure you're staying hydrated. And that doesn't just mean water. That's your minerals. So adding a little bit of sea salt
Yep.
into your water throughout the day, making sure you're consuming enough water for your size and the temperature, ambient temperature around you, and where you're at, right? And then definitely throughout the training day, you tend to get so focused sometimes that you forget to do that. So making sure especially if it's a cold event, if it's a cold day, you don't feel like drinking.
Yep.
But guess what? You're still dehydrating your body more than you normally are.
I drank a quarter of a gallon the day that we competed in Texas because it was so cold. I just wasn't thirsty. Felt terrible the next day.
Right.
My joints were just drier.
Oh man.
You feel more beat up, right?
And
Like
you
that.
throw a couple of celebratory beers at the end of it.
Yeah.
Hydrate you a little bit more.
Just add that extra oomph to it. Right. So you see a lot of people, chugging Pedialytes, and I don't think that's a bad idea.
It's probably one of the best options without having to think too much into it.
Yeah.
Gatorade, people think is the source, but that's really just a dextrose. Well, see, the thing is, Gatorade used to be mostly dextrose. Now it's sugar and corn syrup sometimes, even, and the Powerades are corn syrup. And they don't have much sodium or the minerals for the hydration. So it's just might as well drink a pop that's not carbonated.
Yeah, and it really overloads you on the wrong minerals, right? Like where the potassium starts to shoot out of control, and now you have the opposite effect of what you want with potassium is the cramping, and I've tried those before, and I just don't feel as good as I do if I was to take a Pedialyte.
I guess I think Gatorade, especially because that's also a source that most people grab.
Yep.
The best way to utilize that is 1-to-1 water.
Yep.
And then adding a little bit of sea salt to it, or some a thermotab, which is just sodium and magnesium, to it. But Pedialyte's already there. It's lower in the sugars, higher in the minerals. It's already a little bit more balanced. I even know guys that throw a little bit of sodium into that too, for a little bit more. It just depends on the person, and you got to kind of figure yourself out. But they're also drinking water on top of that too. So if If you drink 2 gallons of straight water, you're flushing your body. You got to add
Yeah.
some of those salts and minerals back into it. Similar things in powerlifting and bodybuilding. Being bodybuilder, powerlifter, we cut weight sometimes for both. One's for performance and one's for a look. Similar way to get there sometimes. Sometimes way different. Powerlifting, you're doing it for a weight class and then performance. So, 24-hour weigh-ins for some of these organizations. You weigh in Friday morning, you're competing Saturday morning. So you might be water loading, then dropping water and dropping carbs, and even loading water, carbs, and salt, and then bringing that down before the weigh-ins, and then making sure after that fact, that last 24 hours, you bring those carbs, the salt, and the water back. And in 24 hours, you can absolutely repair to 100% glycogen, sodium, and hydration. But if you go in and weigh in and like, I'm starving and go out to pizza and burgers with all this sodium and you're not drinking enough fluid, you tend to do the reverse for performance on your body.
Yep. So would you suggest kind of ramping up after weigh-ins, maybe small meal, get some protein, get some carbs in and slowly, and then maybe dinner? Have that more of a feast?
I'm sure there's, very similar. Yeah, exactly. I would probably ramp and do it slowly. But I'll tell you, right after you step off that, and a lot of the UFC fighters use the same principles that we use in these cuts and rehydration. And the hydration is most important out of all of it. Right after you step off that scale, we already have the mixtures that we've mixed. Now, we actually make our own mixtures with a little bit of fructose, a dextrose 3-to-1 mixture with sodium, and then I usually mix it in about 40 ounces. You don't just want to slam it. You tend to bloat yourself and feel terrible. So we'll drink 30 ounces maybe. We'll drive to a restaurant, have a clean meal as you can, or in the past, as we've gotten more proficient, you bring your own meal and you eat it because it's clean. You know what's in it. But, potatoes, eggs, chicken or steak, or rice. And then we just have those small meals, 5 or 6 times a day, and then a nice big one at the end of the day. But we've hydrated probably more than you normally would have. Just to make sure you
got to make up for lost time, right?
Yeah, getting your legs up, resting, letting your body kind of, we call marinate in that, soak all that in. Yeah. Maybe doing 10-minute walks after every meal to get the carbs, to get the hydration moving through the whole body. A lot of times, you ever done a heavy leg day and then go sit on the couch and can't get up or cramp like a son of a gun, right? You got to keep moving a little bit and work into it. Now, with the bodybuilding side of things, it's very similar. We kind of go from whatever you're drinking gallons of water and add a gallon a day till you're up to 3, maybe sometimes even 3.5 gallons. And then you back off to a half a gallon, and you're playing with salt as well. But in the past, the old days, we used to cut a lot of salt. Now we keep it in there all the way through, and we stay more hydrated, so you don't have as much stress on the kidneys. And a lot of times, you look better. Yeah. The body was supposed to be at a certain spot. So if you're lean enough and you do the hydration properly, you're going to look great anyway.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people don't get lean enough, and they start playing with their water and salt to get a harder look and end up
backfires, right? Yeah.
Spilling over, looking super flat. But internally, what are you doing? Even worse, right?
Yeah. So now talking on the bodybuilding side, after a show, right, the notorious, post-show meal.
Massive cheat feast.
Do you go straight to Cheesecake Factory and put them out of business, or do you have a small meal right after the show and then go have your feast after you clean up?
I've done it all ways.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of guys do. I think
what makes you feel better the next morning too?
It would be eating clean for sure.
Yeah.
Having a meal. As bodybuilders, sometimes we get super extreme. We're super extreme in our off season. We're eating so much to get big. Yeah. And then we're super hardcore at making sure we're on point with every kernel of rice and every gram of protein all the way through the show. And then it's our cheat day. Our day after the show celebration, we end up ordering half the restaurant for one meal and not being able to sleep because you hurt so bad. I tell myself I'm not going to do that. I'm getting better, but I still kind of like that big cheat. As you do this more often and you're competing more times a year, you might not be able to get away with that as much. And also, you feel so crappy
Yeah.
that you tend to be like, okay, I had a cheeseburger and a couple of wings and maybe a slice of cheesecake.
Do pancakes in the morning or something.
Pancakes in the morning, a good breakfast. Great, that's all you need, you know.
Yeah.
I did one show where I went all the way out. I think you were there even. I think I did 12,000 calories from after I got off the stage till the next morning. I think I only slept 3 hours. I just kept eating all night. I had a show in 4 weeks later, so I was like, I'm my last cheat meal before that next show.
Yeah.
But the next show I came off the stage, had a cookie or two, had a rice and steak. And then we went to an Italian restaurant, and I just had probably more than normal, but more like a meal, not a full feast.
Right.
So it really comes down, especially as I'm getting older, the swing from being super heavy to super lean and doesn't feel good anymore. And I'd rather be just, you know, like we're trying to do.
Yeah, and you know, this off season you stayed a lot leaner, so it's going to be less work, right? You put on more size, but you have less extra weight that you got to lose.
Just
so
checked in with the coaches today, and already I'm ahead of the game.
Good.
The same weight as last year, but a totally different look.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel way better. You know, not having sleep. All these things are tying together: sleep, your food, your performance in the gym. You know, how you can mentally handle everything during the comp, accepting the whole process mentally and physically, right, and emotionally. So a lot of that goes into it. I'm still in a surplus. I still eat about 5,000 calories a day right now, but they're super clean. There's only 90 grams of that's fat. The rest is carbs and protein. So super clean. And that's how my body works. Some guys and some gals can get away with more fat.
Right.
I tend to be one type of carb source, maybe two, like usually just rice and cream of rice. And I'm good with that. It processes fast, it processes efficiently, and I feel good. So what else we got? We haven't talked too much about the endurance. We talked a little bit about it. I did do a lot of endurance cycling when I was a kid and actually competed in it.
Yeah.
Turned out my body's built for lifting heavy weights,
Yeah,
and the mind likes that a little better too. But yeah, I think we brushed on it. I don't have too much experience into prepping into those. I did when I was a kid, but it's very, very similar. The same process. You're not going to be water cutting or anything like that. You're going to be hydrating and carbing into an event. So you're probably going to be increasing the carbs as you get closer to the day and also decreasing the protein a little bit, because at that point you have the muscle, you need the fuel. So big pasta meals, something that you're used to. I think that's a big key thing here. A lot of guys go, okay, we did our water cut, now let's eat a pizza. Well, they didn't eat a pizza for 9 weeks. How is your body going to react having a pizza the night before you go on a long ride?
Yeah. And that's, same thing that you were talking about, leading into a comp. I don't change anything. It's all the same.
I used to in the past.
Yeah, like it wasn't until last month that my pre-competition breakfast changed. It's the same makeup, just in a different form, right? So I always had a breakfast burrito before every comp.
Eggs, potatoes, cheese.
Eggs, potatoes, ham, and cheese. And it was, I knew how it was going to sit in my body. I knew what fuel I could expect to get out of it. Because, like you said, I don't eat a lot of pancakes. So why would I go out and have a big pancake breakfast right before a comp or something, and not know how that, is it going to make me feel sluggish? Is it going to, mess with my stomach, right? Am I going to have, be in the porta-john more than I am on the platform, right? So that's the big thing going into a comp is keep it consistent. You were consistent the whole way coming into it. Why change it now?
I think you get the kind of maybe the industry standard in a way, right? The pancake breakfast where you go, I don't eat pancakes ever.
Right.
I like them for like a cheat meal. And that's it brings up another point. If you're going to use pancakes before, try it 8 weeks out one day.
Absolutely.
Do a little mock. We do this with a lot of the beginners when they're going into a bodybuilding show or a bikini show or something. How do they respond to what foods? And you got to figure that out.
Do like a little mini cut, water manipulation, see what the body reacts to.
And then also just a little carb up, a mock carb up. You're not going to go extreme with the dehydration part.
Yeah.
You're going to keep a little more water in it, but you're going to see how they respond to the carbs. And, you know, we used to go eat the big pancake bread, but that doesn't sit well for me. So I just carb up with rice, honey, and a little bit of bananas.
There you go.
And it's easy to eat. By that point in time, you're freaking starving, so anything tastes good. But yeah, a little cinnamon on there, and that's good to go. But yeah, it's super important. Don't be eating things before your meat that are not normal for you. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as far as nutrition goes, are you obviously we know how you operate. Do you think that there's a way that the if it fits your macros style works?
So what is my way? My way is more of the whole food base, 6 days a week.
Right. Like your meals usually look about the same, right?
Yeah.
You might have a couple changes for dinner here and there, but the makeup's still the same, right?
I might cook it differently, but it's the same stuff.
Exactly, right? So, or, would you ever prescribe, that whole if it fits your macros style on somebody? Maybe they're just trying to gain some size,
So off season, absolutely. We're going to play around with different foods. I mean, I have one of my guys, I asked him, what's his favorite food? And he was missing it for the first 4 weeks. Cereal. Well, after your training, off season, you're going to have X amount of cereal, and you're going to have that. Mentally, it fits you. It makes you feel great.
Yep.
You love to eat it, so you're probably going to eat enough, right, to replace those carbs that you need. And and emotionally, sometimes I'm an emotional eater. Sometimes you train that out of you as you get into a competitive mindset. But a lot of us tend to eat for our emotions,
Right.
And if you're going through prep and you're hating life and you can't follow a plan and you're going to cheat, well, off season, let's throw something in that you like, and we just we time it correctly. Moving into a show, like when you're getting closer and you're comp prepping, and to fit the macros, the reason you absolutely can, yes, depends on the individual.
Yeah.
When I got new athletes, we have to find how they respond. As they progress, then we can start adding more foods in, For example, Melissa, she can eat bagels, and she can have certain muffins before training, all the way until like 3 weeks out. And those kind of fit the macros. Usually coach guided. You're not just doing it yourself, because then it'd be like, oh, I ate 300 grams of carbs a day from potato chips.
Yeah.
And I was allowed this much. It probably wouldn't work. But so that part, the fuel source, I think is very important. But I absolutely do think you can add other fuel sources that might not be rice, oatmeal, and potatoes like we normally eat. You can add in certain things like muffins and pre-workout and certain things like that when you find out how that individual responds to it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even me in my off season, I was able to play around a little bit, adding things that I liked in, and I was burning the fuel, and it was working. It wasn't upsetting my stomach. I was like, this is awesome. I feel great. I can do this all year long, and not have to feel like I need to go have a cheeseburger every minute.
Right.
So I think it's a little bit of both for me mentally with the physical aspect, and then also learning the individual. But yeah, you absolutely can both ways. That about it. I mean, I think we talked about a pretty good amount of the nutrition. Is there anything else you can think of? Touch on? No?
Hydration's key.
Hydration's key. Fueling the body's key for the sport you're in.
If you never stop eating, it's still the same meal.
That's where I get with the cheat meals. It says you have a cheat meal, but I had one of the other guys comment on one of my posts, and that was a cheat feast.
Yeah,
it was a pizza, burgers, ice cream, cookies. Yeah, that was the last time I did that. I was so sick.
If you don't stop eating for 6 hours, it's the same meal.
So you're the type that eats breakfast and forgets the four. And we got to cram 5,000 calories in one meal.
Yeah.
Hey, I've done that. It doesn't work great, but I've done it.
Usually it's up in the form of Oreos.
Oreos, yeah. Oh, I've had those days. All right, guys, we'll see you next week.